I don't normally do unboxing videos, and the only reason I'm doing this really is because of sheer excitement that I've been waiting many months for this. I ordered this prior to the virus thingamabob starting, and I received it today, looking somewhat worse for wear. So that's one reason for filming this, so that if I have to make a claim, I've got the video evidence of it. So let's open it up, and this should contain a cabinet for my preamp project. I can't quite find the way in, but this is a good way, I think. Will it be smashed to bits? No, I think we're fairly optimistic so far. Yeah, I think we're going to be okay. This is the only bit that might have suffered, which are the large pieces. This is one of those parcels on eBay that gives you tracking, and it says picked up today and is now been accepted by the airline, and this has actually been supposedly in the air for 6 weeks. So that's one hell of an aircraft that can fly around for 6 weeks, isn't it? Right, these are the side pieces. Oops, there's my fingernail gone. That looks like the rear panel. That looks like the front panel. Very nice too. And what's this other bit? Oh, I've no idea what that bit is. Have I got two back panels, or does that go inside? Nope, I've no idea what that bit is. Expect we'll find out in due course. That is really heavy. Look at the thickness of that. It's like Christmas, isn't it? The only bad news is I had to buy my own present. I don't really want to rip that because it will go through to the chassis. Now that's the inside, which looks a bit tacky, but the outside looks okay. That's either the top or the bottom plate. Yeah, that's exactly the same as that one. Let's just move this to one side. I still have no idea what that is. I think, looking at it, that goes behind the front panel, because it looks awfully like it, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. So you mount the pots on this, all the switches. Yeah, makes sense. i.e. C plug. Socket, I should say. Lots of Chinese writing. I suspect this... Oh, there are the knobs. Very nice. Loads of screws. Right, here we have an on-off switch. And the obligatory rubber feet. I've now assembled part of the chassis, basically just to see how things fit and will they fit. And I'm pleased to say so far they do. The on-off switch here fitted perfectly, no problem at all. Looking from the top, this is where I propose to put the transformer. This is the secondary side, and the main side, which will obviously partly go here and partly go to the on-off switch just out of sight. This is the preamp board that we've discussed in the past. Now that fits in there rather nicely. It is mounted solely by the volume pot nuts here. At the moment there's no external mounting on it at all, and I don't honestly think it's going to, but if necessary I might add a stabilizing mounting here. Now unfortunately I keep changing my mind as things go along. This is the top panel, and again it's just placed on the top so you can see. The original idea, and it still might be, was to have two valve bases here and here for the magic eyes. I still can't make up my mind whether to put them on or not, mainly because it's purely for visual effects. It does nothing to the sound at all, but it just fills the box up with bits and pieces. So the jury's still out on that one at the moment. Now the next dilemma, there's more dilemmas than construction at the moment. This is the input selection board, which again I've shown you in the past, and it goes basically, well, behind there, through there. Now it does have 4 LEDs on the side, but there is no provision for mounting those on here. If I just slip this panel over, something like that, and then the knobs, which you'll be pleased to know do have grub screws. I don't want to push it down there, but it looks something like that. I'm sure you get the idea. My original idea was to put the LEDs against here, just drill them and poke them through, and I might still do that. I haven't made up my mind yet, but I'm paranoid about damaging the front panel. The phono inputs and output sockets apparently are in the country already, and I'm expecting them to be delivered within the next couple of days, so that's something I can deal with. And then that's the back panel, largely populated. I shan't have anything else to do with it. So there are my 2 basic dilemmas at the present: whether I modify the front panel and whether I still put the valves on the top. Either way, it's an expensive chassis to mess up, and I've already messed up one chassis, as I've shown you previously. These are the phono sockets that I've selected, and these will go on to the back panel. Now this is how they are when you receive them, but you need to split them down until you've got this. Now there is a correct and a wrong way to assemble these. It's important that the earth doesn't come in contact with the chassis. First of all, you look for the one that has the step on it and place it on the socket like so. That goes into the chassis like that. You move it around until it's located in the center, and then the other washer goes on there, and then the earth connection goes next, followed by the nut. Again, before you tighten it, just make sure the socket is located in the center. Get your test meter and show that it's not connected to the metalwork. I'm picking up the earthing point here, and you should be able to touch the earth side of it and not have any continuity. Well, it's time for a bit of an update. Now, this is where we are, and it's actually been 2 weeks since I last spoke on camera, and mainly because I've had more problems with this preamp than I thought possible. Firstly, you can see I've now got 2 transformers inside, whereas originally I only had 1. And the reason for this is I hoped to get all the voltages I wanted from 1 transformer, which in fact I did. But the problem I had was I had all sorts of loop problems and interference, simply because this module needs 12 volts AC. This module needs 12 AC. And I thought I could feed both from this transformer, but it doesn't work. So I've ended up putting a different transformer here and a new transformer here. Now this transformer, as it plainly says, is 15-0-15, and its sole function is to power the actual preamp board. It requires almost no current, about 5 or 10 milliamps, so any transformer virtually will do the job. This particular one is something like 300 milliamps. Now the other transformer, which you will need, and you will only need this primarily if you're going to use the valves for the magic eyes. In fact, most of the circuitry of this is involved in making the magic eyes work, which is, I suppose you could say, a kind of nonsense in a way, because it contributes nothing to the sound. It just looks good. And we all like to look good, don't we? Even at my advanced years. Now, this transformer needs to have a rating of about 1 amp. Now, the reason it's so relatively high is because you've got the heaters of the valves to take into consideration. That's what uses the most power in this whole circuitry. This particular transformer is a multi-ratio, and I've got it set to the 12.5 volts. So the 12.5 volts will feed the heaters, and it's almost exactly it is exactly the right voltage, because the 2 valves in series, each valve is 6.3 volts. So that's exactly, it's as exact as it need be to feed the heaters, and I'm going to feed the heaters of the valves off that 12.5 volt AC. I'm not going to rectify it and use DC, because it's AC or DC, the heaters don't care, and as you're not going to be listening to this, it matters not. And it feeds the input switching module. It comes in here, and again it's rectified by the diodes and regulated by this regulator to 12 volts. Now I'm using this module for a number of reasons, in a number of different ways. Now, some comments to make before we start. You can see the inputs here. They originally had phono sockets on, if you'd seen my first video, but they were really bad phono sockets, and I didn't like them at all. So I wired them directly to these new super duper ones. And originally I thought I would use screen cable, but the wire is so short, I didn't honestly think there would be an issue with any hum. So I thought, well, I'll take a chance and I'll wire it directly using single core cable. And I have to report, largely to my relief, it is completely silent. There is no hum at all. So really pleased with that. Now, some other things worth noting. I've taken the 12 volt supply regulated from this capacitor. Underneath, I've just literally put in a cable, and this is it here. At the moment it's not connected, but that will go into the voltage booster for the valve preamp stroke regulator, which is here, and that's linked into here. At the moment, this part of the circuitry is not wired, or this end of it's not, because I just wanted to get the whole preamp side of it working. Now at this stage I should say some of this is a bit of a bird's nest because it's still a work in progress. I'm changing my mind by the day how this works. But the reason I'm taking the DC from there is because I don't have any 12 volts DC, because obviously the transformer's AC, and this circuitry, if I'm pointing to the right thing, uses so little current. All it is one relay energized at any one time. So it uses about 35 milliamps. So this regulator is just cold. So I can afford to take 12 volts stabilized from there into the voltage booster here. Now, this is still a work in progress. I haven't tested this yet, but I'm fairly optimistic that that's going to be good and the regulator is not going to get hot. This board has 4 inputs on it, and as you can see here, there's only 3 inputs actually on the input here, on these phonos, the output being here. But the spare relay and this temporary wire goes to this, which is the Bluetooth module. Again, I've only just lashed it in here to see if it works, and there's a fairly good chance that I won't be using this actual module because I've found a better one from AliExpress, and at the moment, of course, it still hasn't arrived. Everything is taking a long time to get here. Now, this is a bit, well, I think a bit clever of me. Whether it works or not remains to be seen. But these all 4 relays are selected by the input switch here. Now, as supplied, a knob doesn't have any indentations on it at all, so you don't really know where it's pointing to. So what I've done, if I can show you this without too many shadows, these are the labels already etched on the front panel, and what I've done, I've drilled a hole and poked the LEDs that come with the module through the holes, and so when you select, the appropriate one lights up. And that works very well. Here's the on-off switch, and at the moment there's just a hole in there with nothing in it. And the idea is, when you select the first 3 inputs, these LEDs light, and when you select the 4th one, a blue LED will light in here, and that's the one that's supplied on the Blu-ray board. I'm going to take an extension from there. So when you've got the input selected, it's playing which input's selected, and when you select the 4th input, this LED will light up, and it's the blue one that flashes when you get a Bluetooth signal, and I think that will look rather good. If I have the Bluetooth module powered all the time, that blue LED on the input will be flashing all the time until it receives a signal. So what I've done, this is the fourth relay, which is the one that controls the Bluetooth. The input from the Bluetooth goes in here, exactly the same as the inputs from here, but it's a pity that cable's in the way, it's only temporary anyway. But across the relay, there's a diode just out of sight. And what I've done, I've powered the Blu-ray module from the same part of the circuit that energizes that relay. So when the relay energizes, it switches the input to that input and it begins supplying power to the Bluetooth module, simply because I've got the 12 volts from there and it's just across that relay. So when the relay gets its supply, I pull off 12 volts and that's where it gets its supply. And there's the cable. It just literally goes under the board and goes across the relay energizing contacts on the relay, or across the diode if you like, it's the same thing. But this particular module will accept anything from 5 to, I think from memory, about 25 volts, because it's got its own regulator on the board. And I'm obviously feeding it 12 volts, which means the regulator isn't going to have to work hard, because again, the consumption of this board is, I think, about 15-20 milliamps, which is very low. This board has actually turned out rather well. I've had to mutilate it somewhat, removing all the phonos and things, but it does a lot. And the fact that it's got this regulator on it, which is a 1 amp regulator, I don't think it would like to be drawing an amp because the heat sinking isn't adequate. But the total drain on this, using the modules and the relays, is going to be about 50 milliamps. So I doubt that regulator's going to get even warm. Now, the only thing it will still have to do is to supply power to the Magic Eye boost converter, which is probably going to draw, I don't know how much that's going to draw, but bearing in mind it's only going to generate 250 volts at about 3 or 4 milliamps, so it's not going to draw a lot. But that has yet to be tried. Now, one of the only things I'm not sure of at the moment is to whether this Bluetooth module will work. Its plan is to go on the back panel, or this module or another one like it screwed to the back panel. Now, when the lid's on, of course, it's going to be completely enclosed in aluminium. So it will either reduce the range quite a bit, or it won't work at all. And as you can see on this particular model, it has a space for an extension antenna. So if necessary, I will either have to drill a hole in the back panel and just poke about 3 or 4 inches of wire through, or to make it look posh, I might use one of these rubber aerials that you see on many pieces of equipment. Well, I haven't forgotten about the valves. This is the top panel, and I've already mounted the B9A valve holders, and I think they look quite nice on there. And I resisted the temptation to mount the boards underneath here, so I've got no screw holes and things like that, which on the original model, if you remember, I didn't think looked very good. It didn't look very professional. Well, this is the underside, and it shows these wires don't go anywhere at the moment, they're just spare. But what I've had to do is to put an umbilical cord on there in the form of this multi-way cable. This is basically going to have to go inside like that, and these cables, which will be flexible enough, will be secured on the back panel here, and so I can have the whole thing connected like this And if I need to service it anytime, I'll be able to open that out like that. These umbilical cords will need to connect here and here. So that's the point of each one runs one valve. So this is how it will look with the valves in there. I don't want to put it in there at the moment. I just put it loose in the top there. That looks a bit good, doesn't it? And of course it's got the other one sitting next to it. So that's the end of this part of the video, and all that remains to do now before I post the next part is to wire up the valve bases and check that it works in the way that I've hoped it will work. So the next part will be posted fairly soon, and it will show smoke, or might even show it working, so keep your fingers crossed.